Hi, so I'm going to read to you a general philosophy on Paracelsus's thoughts out of this book, Paracelsus, An Introduction to Philosophical Medicine in the Era of the Renaissance, second edition by Walter Pagel. Just a few pages. Again, I want to discuss an idea that I have. We'll see if we get there, but basically I mostly just like reading out of books because I'm shy. Okay. The philosophy of Paracelsus. Paracelsus's general system of correspondence and the position of scientific elements therein. Introduction. Oh boy. Sorry. The distinguishing feature of Paracelsus's own philosophy is the consequential view of cosmology, theology, natural philosophy, and medicine in the light of analogies and correspondences between the microcosm and the macrocosm. Speculation about such analogies had seriously engaged the human mind since pre-Socratic and Platonic times and throughout the Middle Ages. Paracelsus was the first to apply such speculation to the knowledge of nature systematically. This is associated with the singular position which he assumes with regard to the theory and practice of the acquisition of knowledge in general. Here, Paracelsus broke away from the ordinary, logical, and scientific ratiocination, ancient and medieval and modern, and follows his own lines. And it is in this that much of his naturalistic work finds its explanation and motivation. If man, the climax of creation, unites in himself all the constituents of the world surrounding him, minerals, plants, animals, and celestial bodies, he can acquire knowledge of nature in a much more direct and internal way than the external consideration of objects, of outside objects, by the rational mind. What is required is an act of sympathetic attraction between the inner representative of a particular object in man's own constitution and the external counterpart. Union with this object is therefore the sovereign means of acquiring intimate and total knowledge. This is not achieved by the brain, the seat of the rational mind. It is a deeper strata to the person as a whole that true knowledge is given. It is his astral body that teaches man. By means of his astral body, man communicates with the super-elementary world of the astra. Astrum, in this context, denotes not only a celestial body, but the virtue or activity essential to an object. Through the astral body, the great works, or magnalia, of nature are thus revealed to man. Through the astral body, the great works of nature are revealed to man. This is achieved, however, not in a state of conscious rational thinking, but in a dream, in trance, fortified by a strong will and imagination. In this lies the deeper sense of Paracelsus's Scientia-Experientia. Let us take the example of a herb with a specific virtue, say that of purging. This virtue of the herb is its knowledge of how to effect the purge. In order to have full knowledge of the herb and its specific virtue, the naturalist must overhear its inner mechanism. In other words, there is an element inside the naturalist himself, a microcosmic whole, which corresponds to this particular plant, and must, by an act of sympathetic and magnetic attraction, unite with it. He will then acquire knowledge of the natural object in question with and through this person as a whole, i.e., intuitively and truly. This science is identical with the science intrinsic to the plant, The science, which teaches the pear tree how to produce pears, or schemonium, how to purge. This is obviously a scientia, quite different from that which can be learned from books or by logical deduction. It is more akin to empirical and experimental research, to testing, probing, and knocking at the door of nature. It is inspired by a deep distrust of the power of human reasoning, and is thus related to those trends of skepticism and empiricism, which were soon to contribute to the foundation of modern science. What appears to be original in Paracelsus, then, is not the microcosmic theory in itself, nor the quest for union with the object, for these had been the avowed aims of Neoplatonism and of magic and mysticism throughout the ages, but the consistent employment of these concepts as the broad basis of an elaborate system of correspondences in natural philosophy and medicine. This yielded unexpected fruit, first in a negative, critical sense, by exposing the weakness and unreality of the ruling, elemental, and humoral doctrine, and secondly, in the adoption of experimentalism and empiricism. In consequence, important proto-scientific ideas and findings already emerge in the works of Paracelsus. Their importance and range have been grossly overrated. Much of the fruitfulness of Paracelsus's work for science is only recognizable in the inspiration which it gave to Van Helmont's original investigation. This was published in 1648, more than a century after Paracelsus's death, which was in the year 1541. Moreover, the bulk of Paracelsus's writing, which fills 10 volumes in Husserl's quarto and 2 elephant tomes in his folio edition, is the exposition of his system of correspondences and sermonizing homilies, allegories, lengthy invectives against orthodox medicine, and collections of prescriptions. In quantity, all this exceeds by far the scientific and even proto-scientific element. However, if we wish to understand the latter in its historical setting, we have to integrate it with the bulk of his speculative and non-scientific lore. Paracelsus's breakaway from orthodox cosmology and medicine in favor of a new system of correspondences and iatrochemistry is accessible to various explanations. And if you're unsure what iatrochemistry is, the definition is archaic pre-scientific school of thought that was supplanted by modern chemistry and medicine, roots in alchemy, and sought to provide chemical solution to diseases and medical ailments. Paracelsus's breakaway from orthodox cosmology and medicine in favor of a new system of correspondences and iatrochemistry is accessible to various explanations. In the first place, one must consider his psychological makeup, including his resentment and wanderlust and his parental home, which inevitably brought him into close contact with mining and its medical aspects. But in dealing with individual concepts, we must not only resort to possible biographical reasons and predecessors, but also find the place that they logically occupy in the world of Paracelsus's non-medical and non-scientific ideas. Thus, his persistent plea for homeopathic and isopathic measures and his doctrine of signatures, so closely connected with this plea, is the outcome of his quest for knowledge through union of the object with something alike in the observer, and for the magnetic forces and sympathy in nature at large as expressions of the fundamental unity of all its objects and phenomena. Okay, there's a lot there, and there's some footnotes that I'd like to address as well. So, Heinrich Ritter wrote a book called Geschichte der Philosophie, German, whatever, in Hamburg in 1850. That's Heinrich Ritter, so you can type that in if you want to know what I just said. Sorry. He says that Paracelsus also voices the opposite point of view, that we just as well derive knowledge from observing contraries. Good cannot be recognized without evil, joy not without sorrow, God not without the devil. Thus, in medicine, the harmful must be separated from the beneficial, just as the inner alchemist separates what is useful from the excreta. It is obvious, however, that the emphasis in Paracelsus's system lies with the similia, with magnetic attraction, and sympathy in nature. He has it in common with, and probably derived from, the verbal tradition kept alive by such books as the Picatrix and such men as Pietro di Abano and Agrippa. There is no need to retrace here the well-known pre-Socratic and classical tradition of the concept that perception and knowledge are due to the union of something in us with something outside, similar or identical with it. Reference should be made, however briefly, to the Neoplatonic idea that, for example, vision is due not to the object or the bundle of rays emitted by it, but to the soul itself. This recognizes some part of itself in the object, as it contains all that exists. Or in other words, what exists is nothing but the soul containing all diverse bodies. Individual souls, however, are but parts of the world soul, which is one and the same everywhere. So, to continue on, it is tempting to find in such an emphasis on similarities in nature a trend common to mystic and magical as opposed to scientific thinking. Because in the latter, the emphasis lies on the dissimilarities between objects, on distinction, rather than on lumping together of phenomena. Hence, science seeks an explanation in deductive, quantitative, and metric terms, which all his proto-scientific ideas and achievements, Paracelsus decidedly belongs to the former group. He's not a scientist in the modern sense. The latter element is present to a much greater extent in Van Helmont, who did not, however, on that account, abandon mysticism and magic. It is the example of Van Helmont which best illustrates the fruitfulness of holistic thinking and mysticism in the development of science and Paracelsus's share in this. At the same time, it shows the historical futility of the erection of barriers between mysticism on the one hand and scientific thinking on the other, for these have not only excluded each other but actually formed an important source of mutual inspiration. This is well illustrated in the work of Paracelsus, and indeed, it provides an additional stimulus for the historical elucidation of his ideas. Now, his approach to nature, and this empirical search for divine seals in nature, goes as this. Paracelsus is first and foremost a naturalist. It behooves me, quote, "It behooves me to describe natural things so that many secrets may become known. Then may the physician prepare the fifth essence of gold and put to shame Avicenna, the sophist, and his followers. Great are the virtues of nature. Who is so thirsty as to work out all her virtues? For these are from God's wisdom, which is infinite." Unquote. He sets out to explore how nature works, to discover what are the ephemeral phenomena and the eternal laws by which nature is governed. The work of nature constitutes, however, inadequately a visible reflection of the invisible work of God. Nature provides signs by means of which God has graced us with glimpses into his secret wisdom and magnalia. In matters eternal, it is belief that makes all works visible in matters corporeal. It is the light of nature that reveals things invisible. God and nature, the uncreated virtues and the created objects. Third part. The invisible virtues that the naturalist should uncover are direct emanations from God. As such, they are uncreated. For God created objects such as herbs, but their virtues he did not create. Virtues, arcana, magnalia, had always been in God, prior to all creation, at the time when God was a spirit hovering above the waters. Hence, virtues and forces in natural objects are not natural, but supernatural, without end or beginning. Eventually, when heaven and earth are dissolved, they will go back from whence they came. It is in this sense that God would have to be called natural, if by nature not only created objects, but also their divine uncreated virtues are understood. Nor are these virtues from the stars, for these cannot beget or produce, but only cook them, i.e., provide the necessary condition for them to develop. As all virtues in nature and in natural objects are divine, human ability and wisdom too are from God. Our task then is to seek, to knock, and to find, not to drown in work, abandoning research, saying that it is beyond our understanding, and thus failing to kindle the torch which will enlighten us. Research into the causes of natural phenomena is therefore a religious duty, as the light of nature is like the crumbs of the table of the Lord for all the heathen to grasp. He has departed from Judah. It behooves us not to give in, but to pick up the crumbs as long as they fall. Nature reveals the signs of God. It also opens the student's eyes to his gifts, the divine cures and arcana lavished upon nature around us. Now, the futility of superstitious practices and the devil. Moreover, it is by research into nature that superstition will be banished. The internal working of living beings, the microcosm, was often expressed in terms of sorcery, Satanism, witchcraft, augury, and superstition, as a result of shunning the light of nature. Nature follows in its own inherent order and command, unaffected by religious or superstitious ceremonies. Colloquent purges and all arcana, for that matter, act in heathens as well as in Christians. Matters corporeal and belonging to this world are not subject to religious influence. There is no holiness in bodies, nor was Christ's resurrection due to the holiness of his body, nor did any signs emanate from his body in the grave. It was but ignorance of arcana and virtues that led people to ascribe them to gods, and later on to the body of Christ or the saints. Paracelsus would not deny that invocation of saints for the cure of disease might have helped out here and there, but he is against it because of the superstition and Satanism which goes with it. A Christian should attribute everything to God and not call out, "May this or that happen." For when we invoke saints in order that bears, lions, ravens may serve us, as they served them, Satan is present. Hence, it is for the physician to take matters in hand, for medicine is such that all superstition is banned, and the physician moves towards the light of God alone. Similarly, Paracelsus says there may be something in wound blessing, exorcism, and even in the story of the Venusberg, in which sorcerers profess to acquire powerful signs or characters. All this, however, is so overgrown with superstition that it should not be believed. The devil can do nothing without being ordered to do so by God. God may command and commission spirits, but their action is through the powers of herbs, although there is in the herbs nothing additional to what was always in them since their creation. No demon or spirit was ever added at any one time or place, nor is there any action of spirits or demons in such powerful spiritual forces as imagination. So it seems to me that the virtues that are ascribed to all things by God are godly and are not inherently satanic. So I was kind of thinking along the lines of, well, at first I was considering that footnote that I read about the Neoplatonic idea of opposites, in that, you can't have good without evil, you can't have the devil without God. That specifically, but God cast out the devil, so the devil is a creation of God. So therefore the devil can't necessarily be the exact opposite of God, but I believe that is what makes God God, in the sense that there is God and then the world of all things of his creation, and inside of that are all of the opposites of good and evil. And what makes God God is the fact that there is no opposite for him. In fact, all things are contained within him, and the virtues that is given to all things by God are like the attributes of plants, or the not the attributes, but the like was said of if a plant has a purging ability if consumed, or the virtue of a human to consider God or knowledge. That is what connects us to God, because we are birthed of him, and he is the macrocosm of our microcosm. And so when we are considering God or pursuing knowledge, that is what connects us to it. And that, however, that virtue of humanity, of imagination, or of the search for knowledge, because it comes from God, has the opposite value within it to consider evil as well. And there is this concept of magnetic attraction and sympathies, in which we use our astral body to understand the virtues of other things in this realm created by God via magnetic attraction in the sympathies of our astral body, to understand that which is next to us objectively. And so it is really important, I believe, to think positively, consider God, don't wish evil upon others. If it is true that our imagination has an actual magnetic attraction to things around us, as long as we are pursuing good in God's name and considering what it is that we came from and God itself, we will thus develop our sympathies to understand the virtues, the God essence of all things around us.